back in the woods.
Afternoon, guys. Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School, back with another diary of the Tipi. Got a little rain going on right now in Southeast Ohio. I've had quite a few people ask me about what you do with this Tipi in the rain. Well, it's real simple. You close the flaps over on the top. You just cross the flap poles, and that closes it up. You've got a little bit of a hole. You do have some water that drains down the inside of the poles, but for the most part, it runs down through the liner, goes to the outside. That's the reason the fire pit's a little bit off center in a Tipi, is so that water that does come straight down through doesn't go into your fire pit. So you keep your fire pit and your wood pile off center a little bit, and you're good to go. Okay, guys, so what I wanted to do today was I wanted to do some routine maintenance on this flintlock. Any flintlock is the same. It's easier to manipulate this pistol on camera than it would be a rifle or a musket. So I figured we use this pistol for our example. Really, all we need to maintain this thing is we need some hot water. Soapy water would be great, but you don't want to use lye soap, and any other kind of soap would not be really period proper, or wouldn't really be of the period. So I'm not going to use any kind of a Dawn dish liquid or anything like that, which would be preferable if you were going to clean one at your house. Maintenance kit is very simple. We made a turn screw, we made a pan brush, we made a vent pick. The pan brush and the vent pick really are field maintenance for things that while you're shooting a gun, to clean out the touch hole and to brush any residue out of the pan and things like that. Those are for on the fly. The turn screw is for taking the lock mechanism apart and changing the flint. We're going to take the lock mechanism apart here in a second. What I keep in my kit, I just have a small bag here, and it's got a piece of steel wool in it that I use to scrub any bits of surface rust or anything like that off and to clean my frizzen. I do have some patching material in here that I use to wipe it down with. I've got, again, a makeshift bore snake with just a T-toggle on it and some bank line. I have my turn screw that we created in the last video. And then beyond that, what I really have in here is a mainspring vise, which is something that I bought, I did not make, and it basically compresses the mainspring so that you can service your frizzen. We're not going to go into that too much today. That's not routine maintenance. That's more along the lines of, extensive type maintenance, and we're not going to worry about that. And then I've got a can of fixin' wax in here. Again, I use this stuff for everything, but I use it really a lot on wood, furniture, and things like that, as well as mechanisms. That's how I grease things. So what we need to do to maintain this is, first of all, we want to remove the lock from this gun. And to do that, we just get our turn screw that we made, and we take the two side screws out of the back side of the lock plate. So we'll do that real fast. Let me move this camera down so you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay. And I've got a blanket sitting over here that I'm going to put these parts on so they're not in the dirt on the bottom of this Tipi. There's one screw, and there's another one just like it on the other side. That'll have to come off. You can see the lock's trying to fall out, so it's putting that screw in a bind. There we go. Okay. Now we can just pull that lock right out. Okay. And now we have an empty, dirty old pistol here with a trigger in it. All right. The trigger mechanism, you can see, is very, very simplistic in this thing. All it does is pull a bar straight up and down for the most part. And that bar activates this lever, which is spring cocked, and fires the mechanism. These things are very, very simplistic. Like, they're built on flint and steel technology. Your flint's here, your steel's here. It throws a spark into the pan. The pan travels through the touch hole. It's in the side of the barrel here that we made that vent pick for, and it fires the gun. So the first thing we want to do is we want to maintain the gun itself. So we've got a lot of fouling and residue right here to get off. And I've got a piece of steel wool here that's got a little bit of fix and wax on it, and I'll just scrub all of that out of there real good. I am going to go ahead and put my spectacles on for this so I can see real well what I'm doing. And I just scrub all that residue off of there, and I'll scrub it off the wood as well. And I don't mind using that steel wool on the wood either, because it's not a big deal. I'm going to dress that wood anyway when I'm done. Then I'm just kind of scrubbing the barrel up a little bit with it, just like this. Okay. Now that I've got most of the corrosion and dirtiness out of there, now all I really need to do is I need to plug that vent hole, because we're just going to dump hot water down this barrel and flush it. So what I'm going to do that is I'm just going to use a bird feather. I've got a feather from one of my birds right here, and I'm just going to shove it in that vent hole just like that and fill this barrel with hot water that I've got in this kettle. I'm going to do this over my fire pit that's not burning right now. Not going to hurt anything to get a little water in there. And I'm just going to fill that barrel up to the top. You can see the liquid in there. And as long as that hole's plugged up, it's not going to leak. And now I'm just going to let that hot water sit in there for a few minutes and loosen up that grime. So I'm going to set that right over here against this pole. Right there. You can see it sitting there. Loosen this up just a little bit. I just set it right there, straight up and down. Loosen up the grime in that barrel. I'll let it sit there for a little while, and I'll maintain my lock now while I'm waiting on that. So now, coming to my lock, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the cock, as it's called. Make sure that my flint's in there nice and tight. Feels like it is. And I'm going to clean this pan out real good. And again, to do that, I'm just going to take some of the steel wool and I'm going to scrub it out real good with that steel wool to get that powder residue out of it. And just get any fouling that's in there off. And I'm greasing it a little bit at the same time because there is a little bit of grease on this steel wool. I'll scrub my trigger, or my frizzen as it's called, real well. The face of it, just like that. And I just want to scrub that pan out real good and get the residue out of it. Knock any surface rust that might be on there off. Then I'll scrub the lock plate and all of that stuff as well. The bottom of the pan, the mainspring, the cock. And then I'll proceed to wipe this thing down with a rag that has some fix and wax impregnated into it because it's been soaking around fix and wax so long. It's just got a lot of it in there. And I'm just using that to dress the metal with to protect it from rusting. Grease the mechanism real good. And you can use vegetable oil. I don't like to use oils, petroleum-based type oils on this stuff, or my knives. I like to use vegetable oil. I don't recommend some oils because they will turn rancid over time, but vegetable oil works pretty good, and fix and wax works really good. Okay, that's pretty clean. Pretty simple maintenance on these guys. I mean, there's really nothing to it. The biggest pain in the neck of the whole thing is scrubbing all the grime out of these barrels because black powder's got so much filth in it. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll dump this out in the fire pit. Let you guys see how ugly that is when it comes out of there. It's going to have a lot of black in it. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to fill it right back up with water. hot water. And let it sit for a minute again. We'll put it right back in the rest there position. That makes a perfect little rest for that pistol. Just sit there and soak. We'll let that go for a few minutes and then we'll empty it out again. Okay guys, now that I've drained out a second time, I'm actually going to turn it upside down on this fire brick. Set it right back in that cradle again and let that barrel drain for a minute before I start running patches down there. Okay, while I'm waiting on that to drain, generally I'll take the ramrod out and I'll go ahead and dress it with some fixing wax and just use a rag to wipe it down. And that's just to protect that piece of wood. And then I'll take one of my pieces of steel wool and dress the end of my ramrod a little bit. Okay guys, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end of my bore snake here and I'm going to put a piece of steel wool in it. One that is not saturated with crap already. And I'm just going to put it on there just like this. Shove it down the barrel. And use my ramrod to push it down all the way. And then I'll pull it back out. And I'll do that 3 or 4 different times. Once I'm done with that, I'll grab a piece of this stuff that does have some grease on it. And if I don't think it's got enough, I'll add some to it. And I'll shove that down the bore a couple times. Now this is no different than maintaining any other gun, and you have to maintain the bore. It's just a little bit more of a pain with a pistol. Usually with a musket, you'll have something with that musket, like a cleaning jag on the end of that ramrod, that makes it easy to put patching and things down the barrel without losing it. With this kind of a ramrod, you really don't have that luxury, so you use the string. Then I'll go to patches. Once I get to that point, then I'm going to start looking at using patching the exact same way. I'll get a large piece of patch and I'll roll it into a circle. I'll put it in that noose, tighten it down, wad it in half, and ram it down the barrel all the way to the bottom and pull it out just like that. And this has got grease on it, and I'll do that several times. And that's really going to get this bore smoothed up. It'll make it easier for balls to go down this barrel as well, because you're kind of greasing the inside of this bore right now, inside of this barrel, with this greased piece of patching. And I'll add a little bit of fixing wax to that piece of patch the last couple times I go down there. Then I'll use that same patch that I've greased up to go ahead and wipe my wood furniture down with. Not going to hurt anything. Before I put my lock mechanism back on. And I'll save that and use that for patching for round balls. Definitely not going to get rid of that. Okay, now we can replace our ramrod, just like that. We can set our lock back in place. Now what I generally do is just, again, a little bit of fix and wax on these threads and on that screw, and I'll hand start them just to make sure everything's lined up. Same thing with the other one. A little fix and wax on the threads. Make sure it's lined up. And I like to tighten these down. I don't tighten one all the way down before I snug the other one up. I think that's just good practice to make sure my lock lays in there nice and straight. Okay, pretty good shape. Function check. Good to go. Ready to rock. Okay guys, well I appreciate you joining me for another Diary of the TP. We've got our maintenance kit put back in here to go in our shooting bag. And we've tested our flintlock pistol for function. It's ready to rock and roll and it's all maintained. As usual, I appreciate you guys joining me for another video. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I appreciate what you do for me, for my family, and for my business. I thank you very much, and I'll be back with another video as soon as I can.